The clapping hit like a wave, loud enough to make the stage lights tremble. The ballroom in the Skyspire Hotel was all glass and chrome, the kind of place where people laugh with their teeth and never with their eyes. My father, Graham Calder, stood at the podium looking as if he had invented confidence. "Tonight," he said, "we celebrate the mind behind the Aurora spine system, my son, Nolan." Cameras flashed. Investors rose. Nolan took the microphone with the smoothness of someone who'd never paid for his own mistakes. I stood 3 steps behind them in a plain black dress, close enough to hear the lie being crowned. Graham leaned toward me without turning his head, his smile still glued on for the crowd. "Don't ruin this, Elise," he murmured. "You're maintenance. Maintenance doesn't get shares. Smile. If you make a scene, you won't even get a payout." The words slid into my ear like a blade. 10 years of nights, spent alone with humming servers and compliance forms, didn't replay as memories. They replayed as a weight on my chest, a familiar pressure I had mistaken for duty. I didn't scream because screaming would have proven their story about me. I didn't cry because tears would have felt like permission. I simply reached into my bag, pulled out my access card, and placed it on the table nearest the podium. The card clicked softly against lacquered wood, a sound no one heard over the applause meant for him. I turned, walked through the rows of white linen chairs, past the champagne towers and the floating trays of canapes, and through a hallway lined with portraits of donors who had never touched a soldering iron in their lives. On my way out, a smiling executive called my name like we were friends. I kept walking. I passed a glass case displaying a prototype limb worth more than my house. I passed a sign that read Aurora, the future of human movement. And I passed the point of no return without knowing it had a name. Outside, the city was damp with evening rain, and the air smelled like car exhaust and expensive perfume leaking from the doors behind me. I sat in my battered silver hatchback in the underground garage, the steering wheel slick under my palms. The music from upstairs thumped through concrete, muffled but insistent, like a heart that wouldn't stop beating even after the body was done. My phone screen lit up with missed congratulations from people who hadn't learned my name until it became useful to have it. My name is Elise Marrow. I was 35 years old that night, and I had been a ghost inside my own life for so long that being alone felt normal. Up there, they were celebrating Vanta Biosystems, the company Graham had built with a story and a smile. They called it medical innovation, the kind that makes headlines and donations. They called it hope, the kind that looks good on a quarterly report. And yet the truth lived below their speeches, buried in code repositories, in audit logs, in a private archive only one person knew how to open without leaving a trail. The Aurora spine devices were Class III implants, regulated to the bone. They weren't apps you could push an update to and apologize later. If something went wrong, someone didn't get a refund. Someone didn't walk again. Every safety protocol, every lockout, every checksum on patient calibration carried my signature, my license, my liability. Nolan, the genius, had a talent for appearing at the right moment and vanishing before the hard parts began. He couldn't name half the standards required to sell the device in a single country. He couldn't explain why the system had to fail closed instead of fail open. He treated compliance like a bothersome theater ticket, something you buy once and never think about again. I spent my 20s and most of my 30s patching his shortcuts, rewriting his rushed work, and catching the quiet disasters before they became headlines. I signed the approval chains because he wasn't qualified. I took the blame in meetings because it was safer for the company to blame the support person than the heir. People always ask why someone stays. Why keep doing the work when the credit is stolen and the rewards go elsewhere? The honest answer is that leaving felt impossible long before it became hard. I had been trained, not in code, in silence. Graham didn't break me in one blow. He wore me down with small lessons delivered daily, the kind that look harmless when you describe them out loud. He taught me that affection was earned through usefulness, and that being needed was the closest thing to love. When I was 14, I won a regional engineering prize and brought the certificate home like a trophy. Graham barely glanced at it. Nolan was yelling in the living room because his custom gaming drone had snapped a propeller. Graham pointed at Nolan and then at me. "Fix it," he said, not unkindly, as if he were giving me a gift. "He's the centerpiece. You're the stand. Stands don't get applause. They just hold." I repeated that lesson so many times it became a law inside my head. I wasn't the art. I was the frame. I wasn't the voice. I was the wiring behind the wall. Being invisible became my specialty. It didn't happen through cruelty alone. It happened through reward. Every time I made Nolan look good, Graham relaxed. Every time I corrected a mistake before it showed, the house stayed calm. I learned to measure safety by other people's moods. I learned that peace meant swallowing the insult and moving faster. They didn't even need to threaten me anymore. My own body did it for them. That's what they never understand about control. It works best when the person being controlled believes it's simply responsibility. On good days, I told myself I was protecting patients. On bad days, I admitted the truth. I was protecting the Calder name because I had been taught that letting it fall would make me the villain. Then my phone vibrated. Once, twice. The same alert that had ruled my schedule for nearly a decade. The daily authorization ping from the Aurora Spine Central server. Mandatory biometric handshake required for supervised operation. It wasn't optional. It wasn't a preference. It was the spine of the entire system, a safety requirement baked into the platform from the first day I designed it. They loved to call me maintenance, but the truth was simpler and sharper. Without my credentials, their devices could not legally run. Not for DMOS, not for production, not for a single patient, not even for a single minute. For years, I had tapped accept without thinking. I had done it at weddings, in hospital waiting rooms, while feverish, while grieving. I had become a human keycard for a machine that printed money for other people. I pulled my phone from my lap and stared at the prompt like it was a dare. A pale box on a bright screen, polite wording hiding hard consequences. Supervisory authorization required. Level 6 clearance. Verify to continue operations. My thumb hovered. The green button meant what it had always meant: stability, silence, keeping the peace. It meant swallowing humiliation and letting them continue pretending I was replaceable. The red button meant something I had avoided my entire life: the sound of a system learning what happens when the person holding it up finally moves. I didn't feel brave. I felt tired, and tired can be stronger than courage. I pressed decline. The phone didn't celebrate. It didn't warn me with drama. It simply changed state, as if obeying a law older than my fear. Authorization denied. Emergency safe mode initiated. On the tablet propped against my dashboard, the livestream stuttered. The elegant demo arm on stage froze mid-motion, its fingers locked in a protective position so rigid it looked like a statue caught mid-performance. The music cut instantly. The room's laughter died as if someone had yanked a cord from the wall. Graham tapped the microphone, chuckled, made a joke that didn't land. Nolan leaned toward the console, pressing buttons with the frantic confidence of a man who has never seen a real consequence. A warning tone began to pulse from the presentation rig, the kind of sound you hear in hospitals right before someone runs. Investors shifted in their seats. Glasses lowered. Smiles slipped. And then the screen behind the stage flashed a message so clear it felt like a verdict. System lockdown. Unsupervised operation detected. Licensed supervisor offline. All units disabled. The first call came before the warning finished scrolling. My car's dashboard lit up with Graham's number. I answered and said nothing. His voice slammed through the speaker, distorted by rage and panic and the background noise of a room full of wealthy people realizing they might have backed a lie. "Turn it back on," he barked. "Right now, I know it's you." Behind him, I could hear the alarm, chairs scraping, someone shouting Nolan's name like it was a solution. I watched the livestream as Nolan hammered the console with both hands, eyes wide, sweat darkening his collar. I kept my voice flat, almost bored, because fear is what they feed on. "I did turn anything off," I said. "You removed the supervisor. The system is doing what it's required to do." He spat words like threats, promising lawsuits, promising to destroy me, promising to ruin my career in every medical tech company on the continent. He didn't care about truth. He cared about control. Then my mother, Lillian, forced her way onto the call with that breathy sob she used when she wanted to soften me like wax. "Elise, please," she cried. "How could you do this? This is Nolan's moment. You're tearing the family apart." It was so familiar it almost felt scripted. First intimidation, then guilt, then the accusation that my boundaries were violence. I closed my eyes for a second and let the words wash past me without catching. "I didn't tear anything apart," I said quietly. You watched him take my work and call it his. You watched Dad stand on stage and erase me. You chose that." The sob vanished. Her voice sharpened. "We gave you a job. We fed you. We let you play engineer." She said let, as if my skill were a hobby they had indulged. Graham yanked the phone back, breathing hard. "Give me the override," he demanded. "The password now, or I'll call the police." "There is no password," I replied. "That's the point. It's biometric. It reads the vascular pattern in a licensed supervisor's thumbprint." I didn't say my name, but we both heard it anyway. His silence lasted half a beat, long enough for the reality to walk into the room. "Then come here," he snapped. "Get back upstairs and unlock it." I stared at the steering wheel as if it might laugh. "I can't," I said. "You fired me. You made it official." He swore, then tried bargaining, then tried threatening again, cycling through tactics like a man flipping switches in a dark room, convinced one of them would bring the lights back. I leaned closer to the phone, lowered my voice. "You said maintenance doesn't get shares. Fine. So maintenance doesn't authorize operations. Unless you're signing over controlling ownership within the next 10 minutes, my thumb stays with me." The line went dead after I ended the call, but the noise upstairs didn't stop. I could see it on the live stream. The lead investor standing, buttoning his suit jacket with the slow calm of someone who has seen enough to know it's time to leave. Graham lunged for him, gripping his arm too tightly. The investor pulled away. Cameras angled toward the commotion. Nolan looked like a child who'd broken something expensive and assumed yelling could fix it. I put the car in gear and drove up into the rain. I told myself I was going home, but my hands took the wheel toward the building again, because something in me had shifted from survival to finish. I returned not to repair the machine, but to confront the people who kept calling me a tool and then acting shocked when the tools stopped working. The lobby felt colder the second time. Security recognized me and didn't stop me, but his eyes begged me not to involve him. I took the elevator to the executive floor where the carpets are thick enough to silence footsteps and secrets. The boardroom doors stood open. Inside, the mood had turned heavy, like oxygen had been replaced with pressure. Investors sat in tight silence, phones in hand, expressions flat. Nolan leaned against the wall, scrolling like nothing mattered, like embarrassment was just a weather pattern that would pass. Graham stood at the head of the table, adjusting his cufflinks, calm in a way that made my skin prickle. Calm is what people wear when they've already decided which knife to use. I stepped into the room and met his eyes. "We're going to talk," I said, "about the ownership you denied me, about the lies you put on that stage." The investors watched like they were at a trial. Graham sighed like a grieving saint. "Elise," he said softly, "I never wanted it to end like this." He tilted his chin toward a side door. It burst open. 4 men in dark windbreakers entered with hard, practiced speed. They did not look like corporate attorneys. Their posture was different, their attention sharp. The yellow letters across their backs didn't shimmer. They hit like a punch. Federal Task Unit. My mouth went dry. The lead agent crossed the room in 3 steps. "Elise Marrow," he said, voice clipped. "Hands where I can see them." I backed up instinctively, bumping the edge of a chair. "What is this?" I managed. "I haven't done anything." The agent glanced at a document in his hand. "We have a sworn affidavit from the CEO alleging cyber extortion, deployment of malicious code, and attempted sabotage of a regulated medical device network." He said it like he'd said it 100 times, like the words were just boxes to tick. I looked at Graham. He shook his head slowly, eyes wet. Grief performed so perfectly, it almost made me doubt my own memory. Graham held up a thick folder, paper edges crisp, the kind of prop meant to impress people who don't understand what real evidence looks like. "She locked us out," he told the agents, voice trembling on cue. "She demanded controlling shares to restore operations. We have the logs. She threatened patients." The investors' faces hardened as if they were watching a stranger get what she deserved. The agent stepped behind me, cold metal closing around my wrists. The click echoed louder than any applause. Nolan pushed off the wall and walked over with a grin that made my stomach turn. He leaned in close enough for me to smell expensive whiskey and arrogance. "Told you," he whispered. "Dad's always ahead. You think you can take what's mine? Enjoy a cell." My mother sat in the corner staring at the floor, not crying now, not pleading, just refusing to witness the monster she'd helped raise. I forced my voice steady even as my hands trembled in the cuffs. "There's no malicious code," I said to the agent. It's a safety protocol, mandatory supervision. Check the repository, check the standard. He tightened his grip as if certainty were strength. Save it for your attorney, he said. The agent started walking me toward the door and my mind began sprinting. This wasn't a panic move by my father. It was a plan. They hadn't only stolen credit. They had built a narrative that would make me look like a bitter employee holding patients hostage. It was brilliant in the ugliest way because it weaponized the public's fear of technology. If people didn't understand the difference between safety lockdown and sabotage, they would believe whatever sounded scariest. And my father knew exactly which words to use. Extortion, ransomware, sabotage. He wasn't trying to win an argument. He was trying to erase me permanently. As they dragged me forward, I kept my eyes on the main screen still flashing behind the podium. The red banner had changed, cycling through compliance codes and warnings that only a trained person would recognize. I saw a reference to a federal regulation set, the kind that governs electronic records, signatures, and audit trails. The kind you don't fake without consequences. I wanted to laugh and vomit at the same time. Graham thought calling agents would scare me into surrendering the biometric authorization. He thought a cell would force my thumb into obedience. He didn't understand that regulated systems don't just protect patients. They also create trails. Trails that don't care who your father is. Trails that can put the wrong person in cuffs if the truth is stubborn enough. Even with metal biting my wrists, I felt something steady inside me. A quiet knowledge that I had built the system to expose tampering, not hide it. The lead investor, a hard-eyed woman named Sloane Ibera, stood up abruptly. She wasn't looking at me anymore. She was looking at the screen with the intensity of someone who realizes she's been invited into a crime scene. "Hold on," she said, voice slicing through the room. The agent paused, annoyed. Sloane pointed at the compliance code. "That message isn't ransomware," she said. "That's a supervisory lockout required for regulated Class III device operation. If you're missing the licensed supervisor, you're not legally allowed to run DMOS, manufacturing, or testing." Graham tried to smile, tried to wave it away. "It's just technical confusion," he said. Sloane's expression turned flat. "No," she replied. "It's federal law." She looked at the agent. "Run the code reference right now and pull the audit logs, the real ones." The agent hesitated, then signaled to one of his team. Phones came out. A quick search. A confirmation. The air in the room changed. The agent's jaw tightened not with anger now, but with the sudden discomfort of realizing he might be holding the wrong person. Sloane stepped closer, eyes on Graham. "If she's the only licensed supervisor and you terminated her access," she said, "then you shut down your own operation, by law. And if you operated without her supervision before tonight, you were operating illegally." Investors began murmuring, sharper now, like knives being unsheathed. Another investor demanded the raw logs. Someone else demanded internal approvals. Graham's face started to lose its color. Nolan's grin faltered. For the first time, he looked small. The agent's team began asking different questions, the kind that don't care about feelings. Who signed these records? Who authorized these overrides? Why does this audit trail show repeated edits after sign-off? The truth didn't arrive gently. It came like a door kicked open. The so-called evidence Graham had prepared didn't match the immutable audit trail. The logs didn't show me injecting malicious code. They showed my safety reviews, my warnings, my refusals to approve shortcuts. And beneath that, buried in the patterns only a regulator or a forensic analyst would recognize, was the real stain. Nolan had been overriding limits and backdating records to inflate performance results before investor presentations. He had been falsifying compliance signatures using internal access he was never supposed to have. He hadn't just been incompetent. He had been reckless, and worse, he'd been fraudulent. The agent's posture shifted. He loosened the cuffs on my wrists, then removed them completely. The cold air on my skin felt unreal. He turned without apology and faced Graham. "Mr. Calder," he said, voice suddenly formal, "we need you to remain seated." Graham tried to speak, tried to perform sadness again, but the room wasn't his stage anymore. Sloane stepped back like she didn't want his breath on her. Nolan began talking fast, trying to explain, trying to blame a technical misunderstanding, trying to frame it as an overreaction. The agents didn't listen. They moved with the same precision they had used on me, except now their hands reached for Graham's wrists. Metal clicked again, louder this time because the room had gone so quiet. Nolan's face drained as if all the blood had been called elsewhere. His mouth opened, but nothing intelligent came out. When they cuffed him too, he made a sound like a child caught stealing. My mother finally looked up, and for a second her eyes met mine. There was no apology there, just the hollow realization that the story she'd clung to had shattered, and she didn't know who she was without it. Months later, Vanta Biosystems was dismantled in courtrooms and boardrooms, not with dramatic explosions but with paperwork that hit like avalanches. Licenses were suspended. Assets were frozen. Deals evaporated. The glossy articles disappeared as quietly as they had appeared. Nolan took a plea. Graham fought, then lost, then tried to negotiate, then learned that regulators don't bargain with ego. I didn't celebrate the ruin the way people imagine revenge looks. I felt something calmer. Space. I registered my own firm under a new name in a different district, rented a modest lab, and bought equipment at auction with money that was finally mine. For the first time, I signed documents without feeling like I was signing away pieces of myself. When sunlight hit my face outside that empty office, it didn't feel like freedom in a movie. It felt like oxygen after years underwater. Sometimes the only way forward is to stop holding up a broken statue, let the pedestal crumble, and build something that doesn't need your silence to stand.